Chater 921. Ethan's soft whisper seeped into her ears, and her face turned crimson almost instantly. At first, she didn't stop him because she assumed that he would go to sleep after hugging her. Yet, who knew that he had the guts to try his luck? When it came to this kind of matter, zero resistance meant silent consent. Now, she could neither pretend to be asleep nor scold him. She was at her wit's end. His hand was still wandering on her body waywardly. Liv, it's been a while. Have you not thought about it? Olivia was flushing red. Even her voice was breathy. Staying alive alone is difficult enough. Do you think that I have the time to think about this? Ethan kissed the back of her ear. I think about you so much that I'm going crazy. Although they had sweet moments before, the reserved man had never made such a bold yet passionate confession. Even though she was right in front of him, he was used to keeping his emotions under control. He didn't want others to read his mind. It could be said that both of them were beginners when it came to love. He slowly grew after suffering all those painful experiences. As Olivia had mentioned, miscommunication was the cause of her discontent with him. Misunderstandings and secrets were the main factors contributing to their divorce. After the near-death experience, Ethan simply wanted to confess his feelings clearly to her. He didn't want to have regrets anymore. He loved her. Even if she wouldn't accept it, he wanted to tell her with courage. And how could she possibly withstand this kind of advance? Let me go. If you keep this up, I'm going to get angry. Her body was burning. She began to break free from him because things were getting out of control. He suddenly hissed. She quickly stopped. Is it your wound? He nodded. Yeah, it hurts a lot. Despite that, he didn't release her. She didn't dare to move as she wished, so he began to take it his way. His fingers reached her pants. Liv, could you help me one more time? Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep. Some things couldn't be stopped once they started. Like a waterfall, no one could stop the cascading lust from running. She huffed. No, don't cross the line. Liv, I'm afraid that there would be no next time. He sucked the back of her ear desperately, sending tremors down her spine. Did Ethan perhaps see through Olivia's mind? This time, she was going to leave him for good. She didn't want this kind of passive life. She did not want to become leverage that posed a threat to Ethan or trouble him with her issues. Leaving his side was the best option. Although Ethan didn't say that explicitly, it seemed like he was aware of that. The best courtesy that a grown-up could give was leaving words unspoken. While Olivia was in a daze, Ethan undid her buttons with swift moves. It was as though he had broken through her defensive mechanism. With her back to him, she said, I've done it with another man. Don't you think I'm filthy? She could remember how Ethan tied her up under the cold shower in the freezing winter only because Keith draped a coat over her. No matter how desperate she pleaded, it was of no use. She also had sex with Logan. Based on Ethan's temper, how could he tolerate that? He undid the last button and cooed into her ear, Liv, you're not filthy. Chapter 922. Ethan slowly pulled Olivia's pajamas down, and she didn't stop him. Thanks to the dim light, he could see her skinny back and her pretty waistline. She was too thin. In fact, it would hurt a little for him to hug her compared to the past. Her breasts increased by 1 cup size instead of deflating. Perhaps it was because she had given birth to 3 children. 2 of the 3 deliveries were preterm delivery. There were no stretch marks on her stomach. Her skin was smooth and soft. She was literally every man's dream woman. Olivia didn't know how hot and mesmerizing her body was. Although the room came with a heater to warm them up, she couldn't help but tremble now that she was naked. Turn around, Liv. I wanna look at you. No, Ethan abruptly pulled her so that she would face him. She covered her eyes, saying, hurry up. He chuckled lightly. How can I rush things when it comes to this? He touched her bare skin, eliciting a moan from her. He kept his promise until the end. A while later, he panted while hovering over Olivia. Thank you, Liv. I don't owe you any more, Ethan Miller. Her voice was coquettish. Ethan wanted to take a piece of napkin to clean up the mess between her legs. She propped herself up. I can do it myself. Happy now. Can we go to sleep already? Yes. Good night. Olivia lay on the bed as her mind was in a jumbled mess. The past bad blood flew across her mind. Previously, she loved him so much that she could sacrifice anything for him. Then, she resented him so much that she wished she could kill him. Yet, they had sex a moment ago. It was like a romantic story turning into a fantasy. The plot was a series of unexpected turns of events. Ethan hugged her for the rest of the night without crossing the line. Like a loyal golden retriever, he rested his chin on her shoulder. He had her completely in his arms. 3 days ago, his back hurt so much that he couldn't sleep. Fortunately, his recovery was quick. His wound slowly scabbed over within the past 3 days, hence the bearable pain today. That, plus the sexual pleasure he slept so soundly with her in his arms. Olivia, who had her mind miles away, soon got used to his embrace. She took it as a perfect ending for her 18-year-old self. At least she was able to appreciate him during the past few days by getting over her past resentment. 4 days later, she would move on with her decision without looking back. Their life was chaotic for the past few years. It was full of misunderstandings, hardships, and torture. Thus, it was such a rare moment for the both of them to get a good night's sleep. The two of them, who usually woke up early, unexpectedly overslept the next day. They didn't even notice Crystal's presence. The scene put her into a trance. Olivia was basically a live-action sleeping beauty. Her face was flawless. Besides, Crystal had never seen such a peaceful expression on Ethan's face before. He was hugging Olivia from behind, placing his chin on her shoulder like a puppy. They were a match made in heaven. No matter how much Crystal wanted to deny it, she had to admit that they were perfect for each other. Noticing Crystal's gaze, Ethan woke up from his dream. Their gazes met, and his eyes slowly regained their focus. Once he noticed that it was an unbidden guest, the glint in his eyes turned cold as though someone had intruded on his territory. Angry, he lowered his voice. Scram. Chapter 923. The paper bag containing breakfast fell from Crystal's hands as she ran out while covering her eyes. Ethan's voice woke Olivia, who was deep asleep. She frowned but didn't open her eyes. They had remained in that position for the whole night, so she was uncomfortable. She tossed to the other side and buried her face in his embrace just like how she always did in the past. It served as a pleasant surprise to him. Noticing that she wasn't going to wake up, he closed his eyes to continue sleeping. It was a rare moment to see them sleeping in. Due to Ethan's identity, the nurses didn't dare to disturb him. Thus, they didn't check on that room. Olivia would usually take the medicine from the nurses after waking up. Hence, no one would bother them, and they could sleep peacefully. She had a dream in which she saw her 3 children. Holding the twins' hands, Connor grinned while running toward her. She spread her arms wide and hugged them. Her kids were finally back. This was the first time she woke up from her dream smiling. However, the moment she woke up, what she saw was Ethan's chest instead of her children. Olivia wrapped herself around him like an octopus. The steamy moment they shared last night flashed across her mind. Feeling embarrassed, she withdrew her hands. "You're up." He smiled faintly. She thought they had turned back in time to when they first got married. Those were the beautiful moments when she would wake up in his arms. She hummed in response. Neither of them mentioned last night. Olivia turned to the other side to get out of bed so that she could put on her clothes. Her senses were telling her that his gaze didn't leave her for 1 second. "I'll get something for you. You should get up later so that I can change the bedsheet." Okay. The ingredients were sent over in time. There was a kitchenette in the room. Olivia was in charge of making Ethan's meals every day. Since she overslept, she made 2 simple sandwiches and washed the fruits. She then warmed up a glass of milk before returning to the room. He had already washed up. She beckoned him over. "Come and have breakfast." Olivia took out a clean bed sheet from the cupboard. Then, she hurriedly threw the dirtied bedsheet into the washing machine before the nurse could see the stain on it. It pricked her guilty conscience for some reason. When she turned, Ethan was staring at her while eating the sandwich. His gaze was teasing. "What are you looking at? Look at what you've done." The smile on his face grew wider. "Liv, I didn't know that you look pretty even when you're angry." Red tinged her ears. I'm not joking with you. I'm genuinely angry. And I genuinely think that you're pretty. Pervert. Olivia grabbed the sandwich from the plate. Like an angry panda, she began munching it with her back facing him. The fact that they could interact this way gave him comfort. Even though he was aware that time would fly, he wanted to spend as much time as he could with her. He thought, 80 hours left. After breakfast, Olivia began her routine, applying medicine to Ethan. She cut the bandage and couldn't help but exclaim at his fitness inwardly. It had only been 3 days, but those minor injuries were almost healed as they scabbed over. The serious injuries were recovering fast, too. He should be discharged from the hospital within a week. Olivia smeared the medicine across his wound. He moaned over the cold sensation, making her blush. Chapter 924. Into the next 2 days, Ethan kept seizing every chance possible to touch Olivia. On the 5th day, she was making a meal in the kitchen while wearing an apron. The kitchen hood whirred. Without her realizing it, he hugged her from the back. It caught her off guard, making her wonder what he was up to again. What are you doing? She turned the stove off and moved the food to the plate. The food smelled good. Nothing, I just wanted to hug you. Ethan simply couldn't step away from her for a second. Olivia was rendered speechless, wondering, did I add something weird to the food? He's acting weird these days. He hugged her from the back, acting cute like a little kid. I'm just regretting how I didn't appreciate you when you're such a lovely person. She snorted angrily. Yes, I had this coming. This is my punishment. Enough, wash your hands. Let's eat. Their time together was coming to an end. The number of meals she would make for him could be counted with 2 hands. Still, Ethan didn't release her. Don't move. Let me hug you for a while longer. Dead silence filled the room. The steam rose from the meat that was fried a moment ago. There was a snowfall. The snowflakes sneaked into the window and landed on the back of her hand. It felt cold, but the world appeared wholesome for some reason. The door opened to reveal Crystal running over with dinner. Sova, look what I bought you. It's... Words failed her as she watched the scene. The man she loved for so long was hugging another woman, and she had never once seen that gentle expression he was wearing before this. So he did have such a gentle side to him. It was just that it wasn't for Crystal. He frowned. How many times do I have to tell you to knock before you come in? She was covered in snowflakes and sweat. Sova, I especially went to the grilled chicken restaurant you love. It's still hot. Ethan released Olivia. He thought he had made himself clear a few days ago, but Crystal didn't give up. Crystal, I made myself clear a few days ago that I have no feelings for you. You don't have to do this kind of thing anymore. This is nothing but your one-man show. Sad, she wiped her tears away. But I just wanna treat you better. Relationships are supposed to be mutual. When only one party is putting in effort, it is called a one-sided relationship. I won't reciprocate your feelings. Crystal pointed at Olivia. What about her? She doesn't love you either. Aren't you involved in a one-sided relationship, too? This is my freedom of choice. Instead of wasting your time on me, why don't you chase after your freedom again? I can't give you anything. Meals are something someone makes for their lovers. You're not that person to do it for me. Ethan put it more cruelly. Once again, Crystal cried and ran away. Olivia filled the plate with rice while commenting, you can bring yourself to do that, huh? If you give hope to someone you don't have feelings for, that is hurting them. Crystal is simply a straightforward person. She's spoiled by her family. The duo sat down. She filled his plate with his favorite dishes. Don't you like this kind of innocent woman? He chuckled softly. You're wrong, Liv. I don't like innocent women. I like you. He pinched her cheek. I'm sorry about her slapping your face. Who are you to apologize in her stead? I'll return the favor sooner or later. She moved his hand away. Let's eat. The food is getting cold. He silently watched her. The determination in her gaze appeared different from the past. Chapter 925. The more Ethan wished the time would slow down, the faster the time passed. On the 6th night, he hugged Olivia as he couldn't sleep. She knew what was running through his mind, but she didn't utter a word. Life was full of reunions and farewells. People would fall and get back to their feet again and again. That was a process of learning and growing. No one would stay in the same spot forever. The sun rose. After Olivia made Ethan breakfast, Kelvin and Brent secretly appeared by the door. It had been days since they last showed up. Judging from their dark circles and how they were skinnier than before, they were obviously busy these days. "Mrs. Miller," she asked curiously, "aren't you guys leaving tomorrow? Mr. Miller called us over. He's recovering fast, and he wants to be discharged earlier. We've done the procedures." She looked back at Ethan, who was clad in a suit. One couldn't notice that he was injured before. He seemed fine as usual. His minor injuries had healed nicely. Only those 3 wounds would take time to recover. He still needed some rest for the time being. Nevertheless, Ethan considered it to be enough rest. He managed to enjoy the luxury of free time peacefully. "Let's go. I'll accompany you today." Not knowing what he was up to, Olivia grabbed her coat and left with him. They were moving in secrecy. The safety exit led them to the second-floor basement. Ethan switched his car into an SUV. Thanks to its special modification, its safety performance was on. To her surprise, the fierce-looking Joel was waiting for them. In fact, he scared her a little. Every time she met Joel to grab Ethan's medicine or inquire about Ethan's condition, a cold sheen wet her back the moment she met Joel's eyes. Joel was very displeased with her in the beginning. Anyone could tell that he hated her. Later on, the displeasure subsided when he found out that she practiced medicine. Sometimes, he would test her with professional questions on purpose. Fortunately, Olivia had been developing herself with professional knowledge over the past 2 years. That was why he was satisfied with her answers. The relationship between the two improved a little. The strict Joel was a respectful yet scary mentor to her. Olivia was going to leave the place soon. She greeted him softly when she approached him, "Dr. Tucker." She reckoned that he was here to send Ethan off. Olivia, who was used to Joel's cold attitude, was going to enter the car to wait for Ethan. Yet, he beckoned her over. "Olivia, come with me." Slightly surprised, she pointed at the tip of her nose. "Me, is there another person called Olivia here?" Joel left with hurried steps. She glanced at Ethan, who patted her shoulder. "Go ahead." She followed Joel to a side before calling nervously, "Dr. Tucker. I've learned about your story from Rufus." Olivia's eyes widened at the mention of that name as she wondered, "Is it my previous mentor? It only was here at a medical school. He was the top surgeon in the country. He had always put her on a pedestal. She became his assistant when she was in her first year, participating in surgeries to learn. He had high hopes for her, so he was the strictest to her in school. He said, 'You're a genius. I am not the end goal of your career. This is only the beginning.'" Rufus played the role of a mentor and a father to her, and yet she did something that broke his heart. "Mr. Moran, how is he doing?" Joel replied coldly, "Bad. He said the mentee who made him proud gave up on her honor for a bastard." Chapter 926. As soon as Joel finished, tears trickled down Olivia's eyes. Until today, she could still remember how Rufus, who had just finished surgery, rushed to the school while holding a scalpel in his surgery gown. It was because she handed over the application to quit school back then. At first, he had many guesses in his mind. Did her family go bankrupt? Or did someone threaten her? He suggested she apply for a full scholarship if she needed money. He even offered her to join surgeries as her mentor. If Olivia was forced to change her career choice because of her family, Rufus claimed that he could discuss it with Jeff. He was huffing and puffing, drenched in sweat from all the running that day. "Olivia, don't do anything stupid. You have a bright future ahead of you. If you're facing hardships, you can tell me. I'll do everything in my power to help you." When she told him that she was going to marry someone, his jaw almost dropped to the ground. He thought he was hearing things after having performed a long surgery. "Did he cast a spell upon you? How could you say such absurdity?" Everyone responded the same as Rufus upon learning the news that Olivia was going to marry someone. He tried to talk her out of it the whole day. After that, he even paid Jeff a visit to talk about it, but it was useless. So, Rufus went to Ethan's office alone. Ethan treated Rufus with respect. Still, it wasn't enough to dissuade her from marrying Ethan. How could an outsider convince her not to marry Ethan when she had made up her mind? In the end, the disappointed Rufus looked at Olivia. "Olivia, I hope you won't regret your decision." "Mr. Moran, I will never regret the choice I made." She was still naive at that time. On the day he left, the insects were singing loudly, and the sunlight pulled his shadow long. Guilt grew in Olivia every single time she recalled that scene. She reckoned that Rufus regretted being her mentor. Years passed in the blink of an eye. She wiped her tears away. "Yes, I gave up on medicine and gambled my whole life on a man only to be hurt by him. It's life. You won't know it's the wrong path unless you've been through it. How are we supposed to know what we want without making wrong decisions and mistakes?" "Olivia, it is still all right to return to that kind of life," claimed Joel. He passed her a business card. "Your mentor has never given up on you. I hope you won't be his biggest regret. A genius shouldn't meet their downfall that easily. If you are willing to make a comeback, feel free to contact me at any time. I know some top professionals and scholars from all over the world. Let's contribute to the medical world for mankind's sake. I'll be waiting for you." Olivia looked at the business card that read, Golden Medical Institute. It wasn't a famous medical organization, but she figured that it should be a decent one since Rufus was one of the members. She silently kept the business card and returned to the car to wait for Ethan. She couldn't hear the noises outside. "Thank you for saving me, Uncle Tucker," Ethan thanked respectfully. He kept Olivia in the dark regarding how risky the surgery was. One of the glass shreds was buried deeply in a vital spot. If it had been removed without care, his life would have been in danger. Fortunately, there was an experienced Joel to bring Ethan away from death's doorstep. "I thought you've learned your lesson after all these years. I didn't expect you to be this wayward as you were in the past. You had this coming for being her reason to give up on medicine." Chapter 927. Despite his sharp tongue, Joel had always been a man with a soft heart. Do you know how many times he had told me off? He just won't stop scolding me. If I had not told him that you'll return Olivia to him, I wouldn't have known what to do. Thank you so much for pulling some strings, Uncle Tucker. Joel waved his hand. Enough with this. I promised you because I saw the potential in her. If she was useless, I wouldn't have wasted my time on this. Let's talk about you. Are you really willing to let her go? Don't regret it tomorrow. I'm too old to play games with you youngsters. Don't worry, Uncle Tucker. I was immature back then. I thought that what I did was for her sake. Now, I understand that loving someone is not fettering her wings but respecting her dreams. You wouldn't have ended up this way if you realized this sooner. But it's still not too late to make up for your mistakes. You have a long journey ahead. Got it. Now, scram. Let's not meet each other anymore. Thank you for taking care of us this whole time, Uncle Tucker. Ethan left and entered the car. Olivia didn't know what kind of conversation the men shared. She kept feeling that Ethan had changed a lot compared to before. The car was slowly driven out of the basement. After they steered through the darkness, it was bright ahead of them. The streets were filled to the brim with people who were excited to welcome the new year. It's been years since we last welcomed the new year together, Ethan suddenly exclaimed. Yeah, whose fault is that? After a race with the death, Olivia felt fortunate to be able to stay alive. She didn't even notice that it was almost time to welcome the new year. Today's the last day. Where are you taking me? She looked at him. You'll find out when we arrive. The car was slowly driven out of the city, heading toward the suburbs. The dancing snowflakes adorned the beautiful scenery with a light touch. The road was getting steeper. The farther they traveled, the fewer buildings they could see. In the end, there was only snow in the woods. Olivia grabbed onto the armrest tightly due to the rough journey. She didn't know how long they had traveled. There was no sign of people at all. As they explored deeper into the mountain, her phone showed no signal. Ethan explained, there's no signal here. She wondered, just where are we going? What a mysterious place. Soon, brightness shone ahead of them. Although it was surrounded by mountains, the land was spacious, with an archery range and a drill. They could hear people shouting their slogans from afar. As they approached the crowd, Olivia could see a young man in the snow. He seemed to be 10 years old. The kid standing behind him appeared to be 5 years younger than him. The boys were wearing the same clothes. They wore boots, so they ran on the snowfield with difficulty. She didn't know how long they had been running, but he seemed exhausted. He was huffing and puffing. The kid before him pulled ahead with a huge gap between them. Although the boy was slow, he showed no intention of stopping. It broke her heart to watch that as she grabbed Ethan's wrist. Is that our child? It is. That's Connor. He's still a young boy. How could you let him be? Cried Olivia. It was the child she delivered after suffering for months. She already cared about Connor so much when she assumed that he was Marina's kid, let alone after finding out that he was her own son. How could she bring herself to let him be? Liv, I have to train him so that he can protect himself. Spoiling him will only do him no good. Besides, he's stronger than you think he is. Don't underestimate him because of his young age. He's willing to take this upon himself. Look, Connor fell onto the ground due to unsteady steps. Her heart wrenched when his little face smacked into the snow. Chapter 928. Olivia hurriedly opened the door, wanting to get out of the car. However, Ethan pulled her back. Liv, since I've entrusted him to the trainer, let's not interrupt his training. The rules say it all here. If you wanna meet him, you have to wait until he reaches all of his targets for all of the training. Olivia leaned against the window to watch outside. The tall man reached out to Connor. It seemed like he was asking the boy if he needed some rest. After all, Connor was Ethan's son. The trainer would more or less make up an excuse for Connor to rest. Connor didn't take the trainer's hand. I can get up on my own. He slowly got back to his feet. Despite the small frame, there was an enormous strength in him. Once again, he slowly ran forward to keep up with the troop. Olivia didn't know what was on his mind. Even though he couldn't keep up with the troop, he still ran forward with all his might. The guilt grew in her because she felt that she owed him too much. Tears were flowing down her cheeks. She didn't know what kind of life Ethan had been through, but Connor was still a child to her. By the time Connor finished running, the older kids had already gone for a meal. When he arrived at the canteen, there was only leftover food. Olivia couldn't tolerate that. He's just a kid. How is he going to grow up if he can't even eat well? No, I have to take him with me. Calm down, Liv. This is how the kids go through their days here. A dietitian is looking after them. Connor is taller than his peers, and he's healthy. He's my son. It pains me to watch him like this, too. She watched the boy sit down meekly without complaining. When he was going to start to dig in, the lady in charge of the canteen brought him a plate of food. Have this, young boy, I left it especially for you. Thank you, she sighed. How pitiful. Your parents had abandoned you at such a young age. Eat up. Connor let out a faint smile. My parents didn't abandon me. I came here on my will. They're good people. After he took a few spoonsful of it, a tall kid swept his food off the table. The tall kid smirked. Eat up. Olivia clenched her fists at that. Why is bullying still happening here? It is already bad enough. Calm down, Liv. Connor is here not only to build himself up. What else then? People like us have to train with our peers. Take Kelvin, Brent, and the others for an example. We've been through fire together. They can even take a shot for me in a war. If we assigned a few men to Connor, do you think that they'll genuinely respect and protect him? You should know that he might die if they mutiny. Olivia gradually calmed herself down. What do you mean? He's here not only to build himself up. Most importantly, he has to tame these wild people who come from different backgrounds. In the future, these people will become his significant weapon. Chapter 929. It was a nearly insurmountable challenge for Connor. He was still so small. It was devastating for him both physically and mentally. The tall and slender boy had a few other kids at his side. He seemed to be the leader of the group. The boy's frame was slender, and his collarbone was very pronounced. It was clear that he had a rough life and was a little malnourished. But the boy didn't possess the naivete of kids his age. His eyes reminded Olivia of an alpha male of a wolf pack. They were filled with ruthlessness and authority. The kid's name is Titus. He might be young, but he's an orphan we found on the battlefield up north. He was eating corpses for sustenance when we found him. He often had to fight against vultures for food. Olivia gagged at the thought. He ate human meat. Rotten meat, to be precise. Humans would do anything to survive. He would have eaten dirt if he had to. Titus was the name he gave himself. He never knew his parents. He was on the verge of death when we found him. He was infected with several illnesses, too. He was sent here for training right after he recovered. He's also the leader of the kids here. Do you know why he was bullying Connor? He wanted to be the alpha, but Connor didn't acknowledge his authority. That's true. Connor is still young, but he knows what his goal is. He will never admit defeat so easily. He didn't submit, so Titus wanted a chance to put him in his place. After hearing the explanation, Olivia was curious about the decision Connor would make. Titus crossed his arms and had a mocking and cruel smile on his face. I'm pretty curious. Which wealthy family are you from? What did you do to end up here? Even the canteen lady kept food for you. You don't deserve special treatment. Titus didn't know Connor's identity. All he knew was Connor was completely different from the other kids here. Connor had pale and tender skin and a better build than most kids his age. He was unlike the rest of them, who looked malnourished. So, Connor got the nickname, Young Master, as soon as he got here. He lowered his head to look at the lunchbox and food scattered on the floor. No one could see his expression clearly. After a while, Connor said in a deep tone, "Pick it up." He kept his fists, which were red from the cold, at his side. He was still just a kid. Olivia felt bad for him when she looked at him. Titus picked his ear and said, "What did you say? I didn't catch it." Faced with Titus' mockery, Connor stood up abruptly and swung his fist at Titus' face. His movement was so sudden and decisive that Titus was hit before he could react. This was the first time Titus saw Connor angry. Connor was shorter than him but exuded a strong presence. He was like a leopard. His movements were swift, vicious, and precise. That punch made Titus bleed from the corner of his mouth. "All right, you dare to hit me. I won't hold back anymore, then." Brawls were strictly forbidden there. Connor had broken the rules, so Titus didn't have to hold back anymore. He pounced at Connor like a hungry wolf. Connor was smaller than him. So, Titus was able to get him on the ground immediately. Titus mounted Connor's waist and started swinging his fists. "My son, my baby." Connor didn't lose his will to fight after being punched a few times. He managed to turn around and sit on Titus. Then, he began to swing at Titus' face. "Look at him. Our son is not a loser." Titus is several years older than him and has killed people before, but Connor didn't back down. Ethan was still praising Connor, but when Olivia heard that Titus had killed before, she couldn't help but rush out. Chapter 930. Titus was also getting angry. He didn't plan to stoop to the level of a kid before this. He called Connor, "Young sir," because everyone there was an orphan. He always tried to make Connor angry because he was too rebellious. Unlike the other kids, he still hadn't submitted himself to Titus' control after so many days. Titus was always looking for a chance to put Connor in his place and assert dominance over the other kids. Connor was more stubborn than he had expected. Not only did he keep fighting, but he also got more vicious as the fight went on. There was an undying fighting spirit in his eyes. What was wrong with him? Why was he such a tough nut to crack? "You're dead, kid." Titus was ready to get serious. He raised his hand, about to punch Connor in the head. "Stop." Connor had already closed his eyes in resignation. His weak little body couldn't possibly hold Titus off. At that moment, someone grabbed Titus' wrist. Everyone's gaze fell on the person who had just run over. Olivia was panting from her sprint. She had made it just in time. She didn't know that the instructors in the distance had already raised a tranquilizer gun. Even if she hadn't shown up, Titus would have been shot and rendered immobile. Connor felt like he was in a dream. He hadn't seen Olivia in a long time. His memories of his younger days were fuzzy. His father always told him that his mother loved him more than anyone else in the world. When he was younger, he didn't really know what was going on. As he grew older, he started to have questions. If his mother loved him so much, why didn't she stay by his side? Even though he hadn't seen Olivia for so long, Ethan had given him a photo of her before he came here. He had always known that Olivia was his real mother. He was able to recognize her as soon as he laid eyes on her. At that moment, he felt like he was dreaming. It was definitely an illusion. Why would his mother show up here? It was clear that she hated him. Titus was surprised too. It was a woman. A woman actually appeared here. The woman apparently came for Connor. She embraced him and asked, "Connor, are you hurt?" You are." Olivia felt a pang in her heart when she saw the injuries Connor had on his face. She didn't care about exposing her identity anymore. She held Connor's hand and led him away. He had grown a lot compared to when they were on the island. He was much taller, and his face had slimmed down. He no longer had a chubby look. Connor resembled Ethan more. It was like they were made from the same mold. His features were more defined, and he had lost the childishness of kids his age. He didn't even care where Olivia was taking him. He just followed her dazedly into the snowy unknown. Olivia brought him to the car, and it was warm inside. Olivia took his hands into her palm and rubbed them. Connor's hands were red from the cold, so she blew on them to warm them up. She was also worried about his face's injuries but didn't know what to do. Does it hurt? Connor's senses had faded away. He only had Olivia in his eyes and in his mind. He wasn't dreaming. His mother had come for him. But, do you know who I am? Connor asked tentatively. He was afraid that Olivia might give him an answer he didn't want to hear.